Okay, so there we go. There's your slide, Julia.
Thanks for using it, Mark.
My pleasure.
Sharing the brand.
Yeah, let's talk the brand.
Notice Ollie didn't use it yesterday.
I do not. No, I tried to get into Ollie's, but yesterday was a bit crazy. Anyway, so there's my email address. You're going to get that anyway, Jennifer, when I email you about the iSchool stuff, just so we've got your contact and things. But anyway, my name is Mark Irwin, and I'm an education officer in Education Scotland. My remit is STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths, but I do an awful lot of work around about learning for sustainability, and I'm a huge fan of creativity. So I don't think it's always that useful for us to have our job title, to be honest. So I'm just Mark today, who's interested in stuff. Jen?
I'm Jen. I'm a development officer in the Improving Gender Balance and Equalities team. However, over the past year, I've been dipping into a lot of different things like children's rights, play pedagogy, working with expressive arts working groups. So again, it's like Mark, jack of all trades. And I think, today, not about the job title, because we've got so many skills in so many different areas. And Julia, seeing as you're here, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, I'm Julia, and Jen and I have been on quite a few campfire calls together, so I feel like I know you very well already. Yeah. But yeah, I'm Education Officer for Creativity, and lucky enough to work with Mark and Jen on a regular basis. We're all actually in the North team. We have regional teams, and we're all work together in that team, which is great.
Interestingly, all three of us are in Glasgow as well.
Yeah.
It's a rare occurrence for us in the north, isn't it? So.
Yeah.
And Jennifer, you introduce yourself as well, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Jennifer Graham. I am an English teacher to trade, but I'm part of North Ayrshire's Pupil Support Service, and I work in a team called Extended Outreach. And we work, as I said, with secondary age young people who are not sustaining mainstream for a whole variety of reasons. School refusers, people with mental health issues. I've been in the job for about 13 years, and when I first started it was loads of boys with behaviour, but it's completely changed, and our client group is really not that at all anymore. The schools are much better equipped at dealing with those kind of candidates. So the young people we get are really, really struggling really to engage, I would say, just with society in general, and education then becomes a part of that. So it's very much just trying to help them just re-engage with life. I mean, lots of these kids we work with, by the time we see them, they've been in their rooms for 18 months plus. They've been on waiting lists for mental health services for over 24 months, so they're just crying out for help, and they're just becoming more and more insular. So it's really just about, first and foremost, relationship building with them and their families, and building trust, and then trying to move forward in sometimes very tiny small steps to hopefully get to a point when they're 16 so that they can make a successful transition.
That's saying I've got people waiting in the lobby. Can anyone else let them in?
Yeah, I just did.
Okay,
Claire,
thank you.
Claire's just come from a design sprint she's been running for our stuff as well.
Hello, Claire.
Hi. Sorry to be late joining you. I'm really looking forward to this.
Hi, Claire.
Yeah.
Hi, Julia. How are you?
We have Claire. We're just in the process of doing some introductions. To be honest, we have Jennifer Graham from North Ayrshire who's taking part today, and that's it. And yourself.
Oh.
But it's cool, actually. I'm going to be really upfront. Just everything Jennifer said to me there really spoke to me, and I think this could be really interesting. Actually thinking about that client group as we go through here, Jennifer. I think that's because actually, to me, that the sort of approach to hackathons may lend itself because we're looking at things in a different way and taking a different approach. So, so Claire, so it's Mark Irwin here, Education Officer. We've got, I will just quickly say we've got Jen Hodson. Say hello, Jen.
Hello.
Thank you. From Education Scotland, and Julia, who you know.
Indeed.
So Claire, could you just introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Claire. I'm Creative Learning Officer in Stirling and part of the National Creative Learning Network. So very fortunately and happily work with Julia on a regular basis.
Tell us what you've been doing this morning, Claire.
Oh, so we've been looking at the research stage of design thinking. But we're learning along the way, I do have to admit, and we're already realising some ways that we would like to change the virtual delivery of the design sprint, actually, which is really useful. So yesterday we were looking at what, why, how, when, where questions around the challenge that has been sent, and folks submitted those, and today we were looking at those questions and thinking how they might help us define the challenge a wee bit more. Tomorrow we move on to ideate. So Mark, you'll be totally in tune with all of this.
Sounds that. I hope.
So
I'm in tune.
I'm absolutely certain you will be. So it was good fun.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So Claire, just to explain, so originally with the numbers, we were actually going to take part in a very mini hackathon.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking it was getting close to being a nano hack. I think because there's only a couple of us, I think we'll just have this sort of conversation around about what hackathons are, how, and the sort of approach we would take. So I'm really looking for this to turn into a bit of a chat between us as much as possible.
Wonderful.
Okay. And if there's sort of like, how could we use this in whatever different contexts and things. Okay. So does that sound okay to you?
Sounds great. Thanks.
I mean, I'll be honest, having a chat this morning is so much better than doing a presentation. But this is actually what I need. So, so introductions are done. You missed the icebreaker. It was a belter. Thank you, Jen. So let's see if I can get this working. Next slide, please. Right. So, what's a hack? And that is not a rhetorical question, and in particular because there's so few of you have to answer. So, what do you think when you hear that word? So, what do you think a hack is, or what do you think of when you hear hack? Someone.
Like a quick way of doing something.
Yeah, like a shortcut.
Shortcut. I was thinking shortcuts. Yeah.
Shortcuts. Excellent. What I think's interesting is that you guys have sort of like what we've quite often find is people automatically think of hacking your bank account, that kind of stuff. So I like the way that you've been talking there about it's something quick to do. And actually, I think this is what it's about. It's about life hacks has became almost far more of the sort of currency of the way we describe doing things. And I think that's reflected there. So any of you guys got some life hacks you would like to share that you maybe know of?
I shall start and say that I cut up a lemon and put it in my fridge to clean it, and it's a shortcut and it's quick and it's easy because you just cut it up and you put it in and suddenly the fridge smells really nice, and I don't have to do any cleaning, like so it's brilliant. Love a lemon in the fridge. Works.
Yeah.
That's great. I didn't know that one.
You could, and I googled it this morning, you can also put a lemon in boiling water, put it in the microwave, it'll clean your microwave for you, doing nothing. Absolutely amazing. I'm going to try that later.
Yep.
Nice.
Excellent. Anyone else?
You know, I was thinking of hack in a different way, as in kind of hacking at a tree, maybe, so breaking things down. Yeah, that's not really a life hack, but maybe it is. So breaking things into smaller parts, maybe.
Yep.
Easier digestible chunks.
Yeah, that's not as useful as the lemon life hack though.
Jennifer, Julia, you get any life hacks perhaps you know of?
Well, this is a bit, just continuing the lemon theme because it's the only one that comes to mind at the moment, but if you heat a lemon up before you squeeze it, you get more juice.
Ooh.
So you can just put it in a warm oven just for a few minutes and then you get more juice out when you squeeze it.
I'm liking the lemon stuff so far.
Yeah. Roll it as well, I think. You tend to
I was going to say that, Jennifer.
roll it. But that's probably a heating thing. Maybe that's to do with heat. The same if you want peeling a boiled egg. If you give it a good roll first, that usually makes it a bit easier to peel.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
And that's exactly it. I really like that sort of stuff. Definitely rolling. I use that for limes all the time. Here's my current favourite one. Okay, this isn't mine. Do you know the cutlery holders that you get from IKEA? Which that one is. Genuinely the best little fire ever. I mean, this one, someone soldered this stuff on here so you can put a pot on top of it. But I've just been using mine with some kindling, and actually it's just a self-contained wee fire. It's amazing. It just starts straight away, and because of the holes, it's letting all the air and oxygen in, and then it goes cool instantly. It's still quite freaky, even on my science guy, how quickly that just goes cold, and I mean within a minute. Once you've taken them out, it's incredibly light. And actually, you stick it on a few stones, a few rocks. It's not even harming the ground. So there's my favourite at the moment.
That's lovely.
Nice one.
That really is.
Do you heat stuff up on it, Mark? Do you use it to heat water?
No. I'm not at the moment. I might get there. As I said, like mine's is just for, well, to be honest, it's meeting a couple of pals in the park during lockdown and having a couple of beers.
Fire.
So it's been really good during winter, just been able to catch up with guys and just stand around the wee brazier.
Not heating marshmallows over it. That'd be my number one.
Yeah, I detest that, but we'll move on. So, hackathon. So, Jennifer, you had suggested earlier you weren't sure even what a session was. So, had you heard of that term before?
Nope.
Claire, have you heard of hackathons before?
Yeah, but I've never taken part in one, hence why I joined today, because Great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what hackathons are, where they came from, a wee bit of history, and a wee bit of some of the ones that I've been involved in, just to sort of perhaps set that scene. And then what I want to do is actually go through a sort of hackathon that we delivered in Glasgow, and then we'll just have a sort of more of a wider conversation, if that's all right. I'm actually going to use some of the stuff from STEM Glasgow, which was my previous job before joining Education Scotland. So I set up STEM Glasgow. So they're going to let me use this stuff because, well, we invented this bit of it anyway. So you can see there, so it's I'll just read out what the hackathon is, because actually I think this interpretation is really nice. So sprint-like event, so I really want to encourage that sort of rapid thinking, in which a group of creative designers, engineers, technologists work together to collaborate on solving a problem, again, in a short amount of time. However, what I want to really stress today is hacks can be physical products, apps, web pages, social movement, a service. It could be a service, and I'm thinking that, Jennifer, with potentially what you guys are offering. And these are some of the main aspects of it for me. It's about working in teams and looking at a real world problem. I think that's really important, that we think about this as a real world problem. I was thinking earlier about this and going, well, could you use non-real world problems? Could you use almost fantasy problems set in worlds of fiction, etc.? Well, why not? But I think there is something really quite powerful about trying to solve a problem or come up with a solution that perhaps we all face. So then you can see there, you discuss hacks, you use materials to build, and a key part of a hackathon is to present to the judges.
So you actually have to present what you've came up with and your process. And I think that's a really important part of this. And I will talk, I'll give a couple of examples of when young people are doing that in front of other young people and how powerful that can sometimes be. So, hackathons really come from the digital tech sector. So the very first hackathon, we reckon, was in 1999. So it does come from the last millennium, but just at the very end of that. And it was actually in Alberta, Canada, and it was a software company. I've put up this infographic sort of picture here just to perhaps show how within industry this is how they would look at it, and very much in that technical digital aspect. So they identify a problem, we move into idea generation, team formation, you start to work with tools, apps, data, APIs, all this very techy stuff. Prototype creation, and originally a lot of this would have been on a computer and then a presentation. So here's some images of the kind of a hack, actually, and these were hacks that I ran in one of my previous jobs. Didn't run these three, you'll see the ones I ran later, but I was part of these. So you can see there, it's actually very social. It's about getting people together. It's about groups working together. But when you look at this as well, you can see there's a lot of people round about computer screens looking at some of these problems. And a lot of this came from data, as I said beforehand. How can we use data in order to perhaps solve a problem? A key thing about hackathons is they're meant to be fun as well. So that's quite key. And when we look at this, I take a slightly different approach when I'm using it in education, because actually the team formation part has to happen before the idea generation. And I think that's quite an important part of this, so that we are really looking at the collaboration skills, etc. So that's a bit different. I also, although we can do a tech, digital data hack and skills, I think it would be very, very challenging. And I'm far more interested in what we would call physical hacking, which I guess is why I showed you the cutlery drainer.
And if I could just jump in there, I think part of that team formation stage, at the beginning of this, we did an icebreaker. And I think doing things like that is essential when working with children and learners in education, because it's about that, what you were talking about, Jen, for the relationship building. And it's when you bring a group of adults together, sometimes, they're in that space where they can kind of jump straight into it. But actually, learners might take a little bit more to become confident around, their peers. So I think, that's really, really essential to get those activities in at that stage to then begin that process.
Excellent, Jen. Exactly. And I mean, the image in the middle there, you can see that's actually the team formation part when I guess we're doing it in industry, we're doing it in FEHE. A lot of that is pitching ideas or pitching skills to each other. So that's very much how that sort of process works. It's like a sort of speed dating part. And quite often we would use things like, we'd have badges people could use to say things like, I'm an ideas person, I'm a data person, I'm a programmer. So that actually you can build teams with all the different skills. But again, that's one approach. I think, again, when we tend to do this in education, teams are already formed from the schools that come in, but we would still do icebreakers and we'd still have different activities for them to start to work on together before they actually start the hackathon. So for instance, one we would do is straws, build as long a bridge as you can with straws and blue tack and stuff. Doesn't sound all that fascinating, but it's actually some of the kids, I think the longest one we've seen built was 35 metres in the Transport Museum. The kids just kept building and building and building. And there was something just amazing about that. And that puts them in that sort of creative space, I think.
And I think even to add to that, it doesn't just put them into the creative space. I mean, sometimes when you say to young people, we're going to do this, and at the end there's going to be a presentation, immediately the shutters come down, especially, in my role as a drama teacher. That would be the biggest confidence lower is saying that that's going to happen. And actually, if you get them in a space and interacting with each other, getting to know each other, then suddenly they start to become a little bit more confident about talking in front of each other. And then by the time you get to that point, it's actually not even something they really realise they're doing. They're like, oh, I'm not performing in front of these people. I'm just having fun with the people I've just met and my friends. So it's that whole aspect of tying in all those skills and stuff like that.
Great, Jen, and just to say fun, really important part of this. Right, let's see. So there's a couple of well-known tropes, I guess, within popular culture with hackathons. So hackathons quite often can be 48 hours. So you grab sleep when you can. And this is definitely not an approach I'm suggesting we take with young people, but that is quite a common thing. So it's a very intensive period. So as you can see there, someone's just like, I'll have some sleep now. The other trope, I am sort of taking the mick a little bit out of this stuff, is the amount of beanbags and MacBooks. Oh, unbelievable, every one of them. And people do seem to almost insist on having beanbags at hackathons. And I guess when I sort of talk about where hackathons come from, I quite often talk about The Social Network, which I think is a very good film about the founding of Facebook. Facebook being something I detest, but the actual film is really, really interesting. And again, that's supposed to be Mark Zuckerberg at the front there, and that's how he built his original team. Was these ideas of hackathons. Obviously his were very digital, etc. So the background of hackathons are this digital computing science, data-driven hacks, if you like, round about that. However, I'm more interested, I guess, in physical hacks. So what's this that I'm showing you at the moment? Please join in, just say what it is. Anyone know?
Is it something to do with 3D?
Yes. Anyone else?
Goggles.
Goggles.
Does
It's
look
great.
like virtual 3D viewers.
Very getting warmer and warmer here. So, Jennifer, you get any idea what that is?
No, I'm kind of looking at the things at the side of the box and thinking, do they slide in and slide out to make the view different in some kind of way? I don't know.
So I'm going to be really honest, even just this has been really informative for me because I just think that everybody knows what this is, which sums up me probably more. This is called Google Cardboard. And one of the things that Google does is they have this thing called Google X. Don't know if anyone's heard about this. And Google X is all employees can spend 10% of their working time, thus the X for 10, on tinkering with projects that interest them. And that can be for Google or it can be for something completely different. And it's about that creativity. And actually, so there you go, probably one of the most successful companies in the world. Creativity is actually, they say, we need 10% of all our staff tinkering about and playing with things. What Google Cardboard is here is someone said, so virtual reality costs, a virtual reality goggles or mask costs an absolute fortune. Mm-hmm. Is there a way that we could make virtual reality dirt cheap? And this is what they invented, and this is Google X. So you can pick up, I've got about 4 of these Google Cardboards in my house because you can pick them up free. And what it is 2 lenses, and you put your phone in there and you get a virtual reality app, and actually you can experience virtual reality. Just cardboard and a couple of lenses and the correct apps. So my son, who's 7, he's looking at Egyptians at the moment, and he is loving using Google Cardboard to explore the pyramids and actually see. So you can walk around the pyramids, you can look up, down, you can walk through the tombs, etc. So this wasn't a hackathon, but I think this is the sort of principle of what we talk about here, where the problem was virtual reality is way too expensive for the vast majority of people. I think we were talking when Google Cardboard came out, it was at least £1,000, maybe a couple of £1,000 for a VR headset. So how do we make this cheap? and this is what they came up with. So I think it's very much that same space about design and about problem solving. So I think it's really interesting, this. Have a look at Google Cardboard. As I said, it was quite a game-changing thing for me, about how you can actually use tech in a really educational way, but cheap, frankly. Because I do sometimes visit schools and see they have these VR sets, and it's cost them thousands upon thousands of pounds, whereas actually this is just, there it is. In fact, I'd asked some technical departments in Glasgow to think about how they could actually make them themselves. But we ran into a wee problem with copyrights, but never mind. So that's, any questions on anything I've said so far? Nope.
Where do you get those from, Mark?
I don't know where you get them because I've got so many now. But like any event Google would put on, they would always give out Google Cardboard. I've actually got a couple of copies from The Guardian, weirdly, that came with that. So I'll have a wee look. I'll have a look at the end of this. But again, I think it's a really nice idea of that. And
I was just wondering if you were a classroom teacher and you wanted to get some, where would you get them from? But that's, yeah.
Just need a pizza box, Julia. Just have a go.
I think there is something in there that, as I said, some of the techie departments, I think that they could have actually maybe looked at making these. One of the things that, so I worked on a project, Future City Glasgow, and I was looking at active travel, trying to get people to walk and cycle more. So one of the things I funded was Cycle Hack, and this was from a company called Snook, that I'm sure quite a few of you may know, a service design company based in Glasgow and London. And so this idea was about a hackathon, but about cycling. And the reason I wanted to sort of highlight this is it became very much about physical hacking, as opposed to going into some of the other hacks and seeing loads of guys around laptops, frankly. The first thing I seen when I walked into Cycle Hack was a row of sewing machines. They also had some laser cutters and some other high-tech stuff, but it was very much about how do we actually look at some of the physical hacking. So you can see here, it started off in Glasgow 2014 and went international. Actually, it was international that first year. We had one in Melbourne and one in Beirut at the same time, but it's happened in San Francisco, London, Quebec, Seoul, Shanghai. And I think what was, as I said, what was interesting here was this approach of how do we actually build things and build rapid prototypes, and actually how do you hack the city, for instance. So you can see up the top there that smile, and that was a really interesting aspect where they created new signs and put forward ideas of new signs that would not necessarily just the smile one there, but it was more about cyclists. Look left, look right, remember cyclists and things like that, and arrows and wayfinders and things. So again, I think it was just a really interesting approach and opened my eyes to the idea of physical hacking. I would recommend going on their website, just Google Cycle Hack, and then have a look at the catalogue, and you can see the huge amount of hacks that people came up with. I'll just talk about one very quickly. And when I talked earlier that we were going to have a micro or nano hack, this was the ultimate nano hack. So within the teams who were taking part in Cycle Hack, so a couple of them had finished what they were doing, and then they decided to get together for 5 minutes to say, right, let's come up with our own hack as quick as we can. One of them came from Joanne Holt, who's a blogger in Edinburgh. It was called Penny in Your Pants. She is from America, so that's why she was allowed to call it that. And she was saying that a problem of getting on a bike with a long skirt. So the fabric gets everywhere and it's a total pain. So her thing was actually you just get a penny and an elastic band and you almost turn your skirt into shorts, a pair of shorts or a pair of colettes or something like that. Very, very quick, just a bit of fun almost. But this actually got picked up. It got picked up by Cosmopolitan of all people, who then talked about, and it then became a product, a real product. And all the funding from that went to the Afghan women's cycling team. So from this just silly wee hack that took place in Glasgow, but it was actually did solve a problem that people had. And then they actually managed to make money from it, but all profit went into as I said, the Afghan cycling team. So a great little sort of example of how quick and rapid these things can be. Just very briefly then about some of the, so this was one of my hacks when I worked for Future City Glasgow. Just some good photographs, I thought, because again, that's part of the principle for me of a hackathon. If you can do it in a really interesting space, do it there. So this took place in the Riverside Museum in Glasgow, or the Transport Museum, probably most of us know. And we took that over for 2 days. And we had hacks, so all these teams here. So you can see that's our team who's actually working on one of the old trams, because we had very good Wi-Fi for the 2 days. So looking at that sort of space, and then the presentations took place in the tall ship. So that's actually me sitting there without a beard. I only put that in.
Do you know, I was just about to ask. Yeah, I was literally looking, I was like, is that you? That looks nothing like you now.
You can see how deeply unimpressed I was with this hack that they were talking about at that point. I actually remember what that one was. So there you go. And again, so what we did with this hackathon was, are there ways that we can make cycling and walking, but the majority of the work, the hacks, we are looking at cycling. How can we make that better in the city? How can we use apps? How can we use data? How can we look at things like bike security? And we'll talk a bit more about this, because actually took that idea of active travel and ran it with young people as well. Just to say as well, with Future City Glasgow and these hacks here, these teams were competing for a prize of £20,000, which would then allegedly be used to develop their business. So this was all funded by the Technology Strategy Board in Westminster. But again, it was really interesting just how that's extra part of the £20,000 and how some people reacted to that was very, very competitive. Obviously within schools and settings we wouldn't be thinking along the lines. However, we would tend to offer prizes for our hackathons, and it would be things like pupil awards, so that the rest of the kids would vote what was the best hack that they think, etc. So it just gives you an idea of where I'm coming from with this. So before we move on to go through the process of a hackathon, is there anything in there that you'd like me to explain more, or is there anything that didn't make sense?
I think I'm quite surprised about how many people are involved in it. I didn't expect, such a huge number of people to be part of the hack. That's different from what I had thought.
That's interesting, Jennifer. So did you think it was like just, and it can work with just really small groups?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I guess when we look at this, so the guys up on the right, that's your sort of ideal size, 4 or 5. When I ran it with schools, it was teams of 5 max, is where I would put it. And again, that's what we were trying to do. But then you can see the amount of teams that actually happen, that can actually take part in these things. And again, some of these teams were fully formed. Some of them were companies who would show up to do this. Other ones, it was individuals who would show up and say, I have an idea, or I have a passion for this. And teams would form on the day as well, which again is a really interesting approach. Perhaps something that's a wee bit more challenging for us with young people, but I think it would be a great way of actually developing them.
And Mark, how have you found when people have come to a hackathon with a specific idea, which then has become part of a team, have you found that people are kind of open to changes that people are maybe suggesting because they've gathered people together from a wide range of areas? Or have you found that there's been any issues with folk sort of, feeling anxious about their idea being kind of potentially changed or developed? Or
that's a brilliant point, Claire. And actually you've seen different personalities and how that would actually work. And I have to admit, those that were open and collaborative always done far better at these hackathons. I remember actually in Cycle Hack, one of the rooms was in the Whiskey Bond in Glasgow, so there was loads of rooms that people could take over and things. And yeah, just walking into one room and the tension being unbelievable. And it was this guy he had came with an idea, and it was very much a digital computing science idea, and he didn't want to change it at all. So the whole team dynamic was a bit of a disaster, and actually they all walked out on him, and he ended up presenting his idea by himself. So there is a bit of that, but actually I think my experience was within this tech community in particular, they really understand this process, and they understand design thinking, I think, perhaps, and really got the idea of, here's my idea, but working with other people, it can really improve, and also having other people's thoughts coming in, and they can actually highlight some of the problems, perhaps, or gaps, or challenges that you can't see. I mean, I always feel this when I'm talking about something like this. I'm too close to it to be able to think, actually, that's not clear what I've said there, because it makes perfect sense to me. So do you know what I mean with that sort of idea of when you are too close to a product or something, then you don't challenge it enough yourself, because you can't see it. So there is a wee bit of that happens. I also know, not for the travel one, but for one of the ones, I think it was on energy, it was a big fallout with the team afterwards, like 2 days after it, about what they were going to do with the money. So they just split it between them, and nothing progresses. But that is, again, that is the sort of culture that's here within that. Don't know if that answers your question, Claire, or was it just...
No, I was just interesting because exactly as you say, it's the people that are open-minded and collaborative that really benefit from these type of events. And I know we've, as Julia knows, we've been using design thinking with one of our primary schools who wanted to develop a maker space, and it's really been interesting watching the transformation in the children involved, who've gone from really being very, very protective over their idea and it being very competitive maybe to, like, a year on, like, you know, just openly collaborating and understanding the benefits of that. But it has been a journey. There's been a journey from being kind of slightly closed to being very happy to collaborate. It's been a really exciting one.
That's amazing to hear. Well,
do you know, I was just going to add there that in a different context, you know, in my drama classes, it's something I talk about quite a lot, because when you get them into groups to create, say, a drama, you know, if you have one young person that has an idea, you know, they kind of end up dictating to the other kids what to do, and the creativity just drops significantly. But if you go in with, you know, you've got all these constraints, sit down together and think what you can do together, suddenly, you know, it lifts the kids, and you see in their facial expressions the change that it's made, because each of them have had a chance to contribute. So even on that kind of, you know, you've got the idea, but on, you know, the what's happening beneath the surface, you know, the social skills, all that kind of thing, I would forever be, you know, promoting young people to start from scratch. I mean, maybe different if people have come specifically to do an idea, but when working with learners, I think that idea to get into their heads that actually together you can be more creative than, you know, just one person by themselves dictating to the rest of the team, because it's about lifting everyone. So yeah.
The fantastic points, and I guess me reflecting on initially because this wasn't obviously within education, this was another, I was seconded out to do this sort of work, but then when I brought the concept to education and the first hack, what I found really struck me was teachers in particular were showing up with, no, we want you to tell us exactly what we're meant to do here. And it was like, no, we've told you the process, but we need it to be far more creative and open and flexible. And people really struggled with that. Actually, for me, I would say potentially struggled with it more than the young people. However, the second year that we done Hack, and we had a lot of the same teachers came because they really enjoyed it, and it was completely different. And I think that it is that, I guess this is what we were going to try and do today, was experience it is really important, I think, to actually go, okay, right, now I understand. And if we think about iteration, which I'll talk about in a wee bit, these are all the sort of processes that successful businesses and industry are actually looking for. So it is really important to sort of think about that way. But I think that we need quite a bit of work before the hackathon with schools, with teachers and with young people, actually so that they come as open-minded as they can. It's not always easy.
Mark, it's reminded me of something Ollie said yesterday that was a really great point. He'd asked the question, do we think children are more creative than adults? And just did a quick poll. And there was a feeling that probably the answer is yes, but yeah, with lots of kind of discussion around it. But he then went on to say, what we need to do is develop a culture where adults, practitioners are comfortable to work together with children and young people, because the children and young people bring the creativity and the adults bring the kind of, I don't know whether we use the word accountability, but things like, useful stuff that we learn that maybe does get in the way a bit of our creativity, but is actually still useful stuff. But he was saying, if we can actually get to the point where we're learning together and learning something new together, that's when really exciting creativity happens.
Yeah, that's, very inspiring, as we all know Ollie is. And
Yeah.
I think he's absolutely spot on. There is nothing, and again, some of the teachers who are saying, like the second year in particular, like absolutely loving it and sort of letting their creativity go, if you like, but being able to guide and support the young people as well. I'll come on to the processes, that's what we're going to do next, but how that can actually happen. But yeah, I think it's, if we can collaborate, as the young people and the adults collaborating together, that's ideal. And we'll see a wee bit of that when I look at personas. And one of the key things for me was market research and how the young people were asking adults of all kinds of ages what they thought about something, which really sort of informed our design. Right, so anyway, let's move on. So we've had a look at this slide again. I just actually probably wanted to sort of reflect on that with all the huge teams that we were going to be working with today. But we've seen that, so I'm going to move on quickly. So why should we use hackathons in education? So I thought that, Jen, would you like to talk to this one, actually? Because I think this was something that you highlighted. So why bother using hackathons?
Yeah. So, we've got in front of us here the 4.0 mark, the meta skills. And so there's loads and loads of skills that can come out of doing a hackathon, because you've got your group work, where you're working in teams, you've got your social skills there and collaborating. Then you've got all the way to kind of problem solving and then, presenting at the end. And we can connect it all back to Curriculum for Excellence and so many of the different curricular areas. And it is all skills for learning, life and work. Oh, there's someone in the lobby, 2 seconds. And so it's connecting all those skills together and putting it in that real life context. And I think in the next slide, maybe there's the 4 contexts of kind of looking at, idea. But it is about that skill development. And, in my work in the Improving Gender Balance and Equalities team, we constantly talk about how we can, look at the young people we've got in front of us and realise that children's rights of developing personalities and talents, and part of that is by removing gender stereotyping. And the way you remove gender stereotyping is putting emphasis on skill development so that young people can really see that they have the capabilities to then progress into lots of different learner pathways. And by focusing, and a hackathon is pure skill development in real life context. So they see relevance to it, and then they are able to then go, oh, I can do it. And I'll come to one of the other gender points later on, but I just think it connects in so well with this idea that the focus is on skills. Yeah. Sorry, that was it.
That was excellent, Jen. Hi, hi, is it? I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. You've just joined us from Orkney. It's Mark Irwin here, so do you mind saying hello?
Yeah, sorry. Hi. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm Jan Kosemba. Yes, I'm communication support teacher from Orkney, and I'm very sorry I'm late.
Don't worry about that in the slightest. You've not missed much. You've just missed me wittering on. So Jan, we don't have the numbers that's booked onto this, so we're taking a slightly different approach today. So we're just sort of going through the concept of what hackathon is and how you sort of run one. Originally, we were going to take part in a hackathon, but we'll probably, because it's very low numbers, probably just talk round about some of this. Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah.
Great.
I'm just apologising again for my lateness, but
No. Don't worry about it. You were in ages ago. I seen you at about 9 o'clock. So
I know, and then I had to get away and do something else, and then I had to come back again.
so we're all there. We're all there. Trust us. Where are you in Orkney? Where are you joining us from?
I'm in Kirkwall.
In Kirkwall. Yeah, it's been a while since I've been up there. About a year. One of our last trips. So me, Julia, and Jen both. All three of us work in the north. So I've been visiting Orkney to work up there as well. So I am missing it.
Oh, and who did you work with when you were up?
Graham Bevan, and I also worked with James Wiley and visited quite a few of the schools and things like that. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I know. I don't know either of them well, but Graham Bevan's fab. He's just like the most approachable guy. He's got
he sure is.
A lot of experience. Yeah. Before lockdown, I was in all the schools. Just sort of peripatetic communication support stuff. My service replaced what used to be the language unit. I don't know if you, however, I'm not doing that kind of language outreach stuff. I'm more kind of building capacity for teachers. So, that's been quite a paradigm shift for the guys up here.
Yeah. Yep, we'll definitely move on at that one, I think, shall we? And Jan, just to say as well, like, so we're really looking at this just being a sort of conversation, very informal today. So anything at all, just come in with a comment or anything like that, or anything you need to clarify. I've just talked, I suppose.
I've lost sound. Is anyone else?
I have too. It's really quiet, but you've gone really.
I can hear you again.
Yeah, it's that thing again where it just jumps. Yeah, me and Teams there. My favourite. Anyway, so if we're, I guess, looking at here and thinking about these skills in relation to, for me, a lot of where I get really excited is around about collaboration. And then the innovation strand as well is the one that I guess really speaks to me. Obviously creativity is within, I mean, however they've decided to do this, but that word innovation and collaboration are really key. And for them to work right, it's got to be about creativity. And I really love the fact that curiosity is in there as well. I mean, we can all be very curious about why things are the way that they are and how can we perhaps change them. And that's maybe what hackathon. Okay, so we're going to move on. Hello, Alexandra. It's Mark Irwin here. I'm just going to move on to the next slide. So I guess if we think about where would a hackathon fit? So within the Scottish education system, so just wanted to highlight a few things here. So obviously we're thinking of this through creativity, and I think that's absolutely at the heart of it, of what we're trying to do. However, a lot of the time, a lot of the work can look at STEM, because we quite often are looking at design and engineering and technical designs to actually solve some of our problems. And sometimes, which we'll see in a minute, sometimes our solutions could be engineering problems. It could be data problems or solutions, sorry. Or they could be scientific solutions as well. However, I think it's important that we think about services and the impact that actually communication and the arts can have on people's behaviour. Because so often what we're looking for with a hackathon is perhaps to change people's behaviour a bit, to direct them into something that's perhaps more sustainable. And then talking of sustainability there, so you can see Vision 2030 plus. So that learning for sustainability to me is my key driver, I guess, in a lot of my work. And I think this is where I really like to look at that hackathon approach to this. Lots of sustainability problems are very wicked issues. And it really, I think that this sort of design approach to them can be really useful. Other thing I just want to highlight there is for context, for learning. And again, something like a hackathon can really have a really good impact, I think, across these. So even if we look at the ethos and life of school as a community, well, can we hack local issues? This is something I'm looking and doing in the Cairngorms. Can we actually look at, and for instance, up in Orkney, potentially we could say, okay, well, what is one of the problems that we have? Is it public transport? Are there ways that we can actually look at that? Could the judges for the hacks come from the local community? Could the challenges and personas be set by real people where you live? Again, to me, that makes the whole thing become more real and more alive. Opportunities for personal development, I think, really key. And sometimes I think we get a wee bit bogged down on awards, etc. But that's not for me. I think that this can be very much about taking part in an event like this. And all the different roles actually that you can have within that. I'll give you an example. So within one of the hacks that we ran, there was an ASN school there, Abercorn Secondary in Glasgow, and the kids had to present in front of the rest of the school. So there was about 100 other young people there, and they were very nervous about this, as you can imagine, all young people would be. But what their hack was and how they presented, and it was fantastic. It was about accessibility to sports arenas and things. And they all got and it wasn't even patronising because it was such a great hack and they'd done such a good job of presenting it. It was a lot of fun, a lot of humour, and one of them dressed up in character, etc. They got a standing ovation from the rest of the kids. And speaking to the teacher afterwards, saying that was just, the kids were so high, so excited about getting this reaction, if you like, from their peers and wanted to further engage. And I think that sometimes we need to reflect a little bit on that actually participating in something like this and actually getting your ideas out there is a great piece of personal achievement. IDL, it's and really, I guess, at the heart of hackathons, how can we bring different parts of the curriculum or context together to look at that? And obviously that looks at curriculum areas and subjects. For me, that's about the sort of teams that are within there. So that's all I want to say about that. Any comments or questions about any of that? I can see other links, perhaps.
It was interesting. I completely agree with what you're saying, Mark, in Alan's primary school. The pupils were asked to look at a community issue, but not part of their Makerspace week. It was just something that had been brought to them. And I think they had done 2 Makerspace weeks by that time. And actually a number of the children said, can we use the Makerspace process to be able to come up with solutions to this challenge? They just found it a really, really useful way of thinking about how they might create a solution that's right for the community and not what they think is the solution. And they totally got it. And I think that's the transformation I was chatting about earlier, is that all of a sudden the children had realised the way to solve a problem is not by necessarily answering that themselves, but by doing some research first and by empathizing or consulting or discussing and then trying to come up with something together. And they've also taken that into high school. The high school that they're in now have used the same process for their STEAM week, and they said it's quite, they can tell the children that are from Alan's primary school by the work they produce during that week, because they're so much more confident about particularly the empathy stage, the realizing it's not necessarily about what they think, but it's about finding out more about the challenge and speaking to people, doing research before they kind of start onto the next steps and coming up with the final idea. So yeah, I think it's a hugely effective process in in education, and I think a really important process for when children leave school as well. I think I personally feel it's something that could be life changing and changing for society, in respect of creating young people that feel more able to get engaged with coming up with solutions for problems, and being able to delve into those problems with confidence as well. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble, but
that was brilliant, Claire, but that's the rest of what I'm going to talk about, so that's us for the day. Thank you.
sorry, Mark.
No, I'm joking.
My God, I've completely ruined it now.
No, you've not in the slightest. You've not in the slightest. I
Do you know-
just love hearing that. I 100% agree with everything you said there. The makerspace, and again, that was something I worked with in Glasgow, looking at makerspaces. But yeah, the process to me is the same thing in many ways. I love the fact that you mentioned empathy, because I think that is at the heart of this design process, if you like. It is about empathy, and it's about empathizing with other people, but talking to them and finding out what some of the issues are that they face. So, no, I really appreciate what you said there, Claire.
Sorry, Mark.
Glad that was recorded, because I'm just going to steal it.
Mark, you know what? That may be a good because the example that you have of one of the young people that you worked with in one of the hackathons, it might be good to share that one.
So, one of the teams that we worked with on, and actually I'll just move on to the next slide, because it was about the transport and event management hack that we carried out. So it was a young person who talked about his brother, and again, what I think is can be really, really powerful when it comes from some personal experience. So he talked about his brother who was in a wheelchair, and he talked about disabled parking spaces and how it just seemed to be constantly there were cars in them. Some didn't have a blue badge, some did have a blue badge, but his experience was quite often the blue badge was used. There was no one in the car with the wheelchair. And it was so someone had maybe just gone to the shops, say, just by themselves, but then they used that disabled space, which had an impact on him and his family when they went somewhere with his brother. So taking that as the problem, and this is what the team started to look at. So what they came up with as a hack was a bollard at the entrance to each of the disabled parking spaces. Within that bollard, there was a camera, a small camera right at the top. And as you drove towards the space, it would read your license plate, your registration plate. And the person who has that disabled badge, if you like, has an app that's associated with that. And they could then change the registration to whatever car they're in. The camera would ID and see that ID, and then the bollard would actually lower. And the idea that they had was about using technology. So again, that's a very common approach to hackathons. But the fact that they actually came up with a solution to a problem that one of the kids faced as a family. He hadn't came with that idea. This is something that because one of the kids was really into, I can't remember, he was really into something to do with CCTV, to be honest. He's quite obsessed by this and the technology. There's another kid. And how that actually came to something. I mean, that definitely won the Pupils' Choice Award, etc. But what was amazing about that was when we actually looked at that as a solution, that is a business. That is a real world solution to this problem. So I think that was really, really a great example of here's a problem that someone has experienced, and then working together as a group, they came up with a solution. So we're going to now, I'm going to walk us through one of the hackathons that we ran in Glasgow. So we'll just go through the process I think you have to do here for setting it up. As I said, I'm using the stuff here from STEM Glasgow. The resources for this are all on their website on resources. So I used to run STEM Glasgow, so And these were some of the hacks that we ran as well. So I think it's and I really like the approach that we developed there. Not just me, it was very much a hackathon collaborative approach. So the first, I'm just going to go through the process that I think we have to use when we think about a hackathon within education. So first thing you have to do is set up the teams. We're going to look at problems and personas. And again, the personas part here is they can be real people, so we can develop that. So for instance, that example I just gave you, that was a real person that we used, that the kids used as a persona. We're going to use sort of quite simplified ones today on that. And the problem, I guess, is what is the challenge that we're trying to deal with? So we mentioned, I think it was Claire mentioned research. Research, I think, is such an incredibly important part of the process. And I want to encourage you all to think about market research. That's when a lot of things come alive. What was great about our hacks in the Riverside Museum was actually the kids would go around and carry out market research with visitors. So that, and in particular, some of it was quite interesting when it came to tourists who were there. So that's a really important part for me. Ideation, which is just the generation of ideas. And just to say about ideation, the important thing for me is as many ideas as possible, and the crazier or the more far out idea, the better. Because it's easier to get something, we can bring a really far out idea down to something that's maybe realistic, but also part of this has to be fun and has to be really about that creativity and imagination. Then we vote on the different ideas. What is the project that you would like to work on? And I think that's quite an important part here. And again, we'll talk about these in more detail as we go along. Rapid prototype. And again, I think this is a really key part of a hackathon. Originally we had hoped that we might do that today, but I think we'll just talk around about what a rapid prototype. And I'm interested in from you guys some of the examples. If Claire's been looking at maker spaces, that's where rapid prototyping quite often happens. But how can we use just stuff that's lying about our house or in our classroom? And then finally, the sort of presentation. So how do you pitch this and who are we pitching it to? So I'm going to just talk through each of these processes. Is there any comments or questions about that?
Jan, yep. Oh, you're muted, Jan.
I'm not muted anymore. Okay, cool. So the research and ideation stages, I'm guessing that they can also be swapped around as well. Like, you might, as part of your ideation phase, you might then go, that's a really great idea, I need to find out more about that. So then you'd hit back to the research phase again.
Can I just say, that's what a great group we've got today who are just actually reminding me of the things I meant to say. I've actually got this down here. So it's really important to remember during a hackathon, and in particular those that happen over a day or two, which is what I would recommend, that the research part, the ideation part, and the rapid prototype part should continually go. So basically what you said there, it's as you develop a prototype, okay, how do we iterate on that perhaps? But also, how do we generate greater ideas? So a prototype may come up with more ideas that you will then have to research further. So great point, Jan. They can be swapped about, but actually what I would encourage is to continually revisit the phases as well. And you can do them quick. I mean, for me, an ideation session should only be about 10 minutes, so we could redo that. So a great point, yeah. And as you say, you could do them round about, you can swap them round here in the order if you like, or I guess to me it's sort of research, ideation, vote, research, because then it's, okay, we know exactly what we're going to be working on now, what the challenge is. Let's look a wee bit deeper in that if you like, with research there. So that's great. Anyone else? Nope. Right, so I'm just going to move on to, let's go through the process. So set up the teams. What's the kind of things that you guys would think about if you were setting up teams? Jen, you can start.
relationship building. So making
Great.
sure that the young people and the learners are kind of comfortable with each other and kind of have a good rapport so that they'll work well together, so you're not just staring into silence.
Anyone else?
And I'd be looking to see if different communication styles were like celebrated and accepted within the group.
Superb. So I think, we've captured a wee bit of that there. So think about the mix of skills and interests. I always think this is a really important part that sometimes we forget, that kids, adults, they actually have their own skills and interests as well. And can we actually use that? I gave you the example earlier on with the bollard and stuff. So really think about that, and perhaps the kids want to identify as, I'm a problem solver, or I'm an ideas person, or I'm a coder. Again, some of these can be quite good. And we think about all the different roles that you're actually going to need here. So we need designers, communicators, builders, presenters, artists, researchers. And think about, okay, what are the skills and strengths of the team and what they would like to do. I think that's quite important. And something to consider is, do they self-select? So you end up with groups of perhaps pals sometimes, and you can end up with a wee bit of groupthink, I think. Or do you put them into teams beforehand? Or do we do as they do in industry, and then we actually try and let them develop teams themselves? That's not something I've tried, I have to admit, because time is always against you, I think, with education, hackathons like this. So it's something to think about anyway. And then I guess the key part here is where we're going to look at problems and personas. So when we do hackathons, what we do is we create these personas. And when I would run a hackathon, I would have probably about 20 of these. So this is just one persona here. This is either side of the persona. And we would hang them on, like washing, on a washing line, if you like. And we encourage then the young people to go and have a look at them. And maybe say, oh, actually, I understand where this person's coming from. I understand her challenge here. And maybe select 2 or 3 or 4 maybe of these and say, well, this one really speaks to me. And giving them that selection, I think, is quite important. And there's nothing wrong with people all picking the same persona. So here you can see here, so there's a little quote. So Alex likes living in the city centre. She would like to cycle more, but it gets really busy. Plus, she doesn't want to get soaked in the rain. Leave Glasgow is obviously one hack you could do with not wanting to get soaked in the rain. But then we look at a wee bit more detail within there. So where does she live? And how does it, and thinking about that, or sort of like where she actually lives, how easy is it to access public transport, etc. And then some other sort of further information about how Alex is looking at this. So she would like to be more confident. She has confidence, but she wants to be able to move about. She doesn't want to be wearing all this waterproof stuff, etc. So there's a wee bit more history in there. And when we were doing this with some of the young people, then we sort of first thoughts were to encourage them to just start thinking, if you like. Another example we would use on this hack would be Jose, who's 30, who's visiting, so tourist here. And what we're looking at with this one, I guess, is something interesting where it's perhaps a communications or language issue. When we wrote this one, I laughed at this one because I always think, well, the tourists who visit Glasgow have got no problem reading signs and notices. It's understanding what we say is a problem. But again, I think what's quite nice about this is, okay, is there a way that we can make that communication easier? And actually thinking about this beyond tourists, because, that's tourists, I guess, with English as a second language, because actually sometimes I don't think the communication is very clear on public transport about where you should get off, why you should get off. So there's a couple of examples of the personas. Any comments on them?
No, they're great. It just instantly takes you to think about the problem through a completely different lens, which I guess is the point.
Yeah, and I think going back to what Claire said about empathy, this is absolutely key for me for a hackathon. So we don't just have a problem that just exists out there, if you like. For me, it's about trying to make that, as you said there, Julia, viewing it through the lens of someone else, walking in their shoes. However, we want to use the terminology for that, but this is really important. And for me, it becomes real when these people are real. Okay, Jose and Alex aren't real as such, but within this process that they really are. So I think getting the personas right is really important. And again, that could be something that you could do as a community, you could do as a school, etc. You can actually use some of the other services design approaches with empathy maps or personas and go and interview people and create personas roundabout based on real people and interviews you've done.
And I think it's really important I think it's really important for children, particularly if the challenge that's been set is something that's maybe out with their kind of knowledge so far, because it does give other areas to then go and do further research for. So like Julia said, I think it really does bring the challenge alive and make it very authentic.
Definitely. Jen?
I was just going to say, for me, it ties back in so much to the ethos and life of the school within the 4 contexts, because with that developing empathy part, where you've got, I mean, for me, Jose, is it Jose? It's an accessibility issue, and then so you've got this real life issue within the community, but actually you can start thinking about that out with a hackathon of accessibility within the school community and thinking about the different pupils and learners that you have, and then helping other learners develop that empathy around accessibility, and taking into account different learners, how they might get around the school as well. Jose is having trouble getting around Glasgow. There might be some young people in the school that might have trouble getting around the school. So it's that transferable knowledge, and how that empathy can transfer across. It's great.
I think there's a really nice point in there, Jen, about the idea of hacking your school. That may not always fly so well when you speak to a head teacher about that. But actually, I think there is something in there about even how people move round about the school. There's ways that we can capture that, and can we change that? Can we make it better? So yeah, I mean, great points, I think. So yeah, just really want to stress these are really important parts of the whole process. We mentioned research. So really important part again, and for me, this is something that has to happen throughout the process if possible. But if it is time sensitive, we say, right, okay, but you need to get on there, you need to research, you need to actually have a look at different websites, and you can give them some research materials to look at. Like, so I've pulled together some infographics on something later I'll show you. We can do that. You can use potentially we can use other things like thing links, so that actually we send the young people there to have a look at some of the research perhaps that you've found already. Personally, I always like it being more open. I mean, it's just, let's Google, see what there is out there. But I think this is quite important, is thinking about, find out more about the challenge and the issue. So if we think about some of that transport stuff, okay, well, what is the public transport in Glasgow? Let's say we'll just use that. What are there parts of the city that you can't get to, perhaps? Or you can access data about bike racks, about sheltered bike racks. All this is online. So finding a bit more about some of the challenger issue. And then again, finding out about that target user group. So is it someone like Alex who wants to cycle around? Can we find more questions about that? Can we find people who also cycle within the school community? Can we do surveys? Can we interview them? That kind of idea. Really important part. And again, the research has our idea, our solution here. Does it actually already exist? And if so, then what are perhaps the gaps, or what doesn't that product or that service actually deliver on? And is there places that perhaps we could iterate on with that? And again, I think it's quite important when we think about this is, what are the costs? Very tricky one. But who can you actually then ask about estimates of costs? Can you look at local businesses? Can you look at services maybe within the council or public sector? Can we contact DYW groups? We would like to manufacture this idea. Could you give us a ballpark figure of how that would work? And again, that can be linking back to ethos of life of the school as a community. That can be looking at the personas and building relationships up with business, local businesses, etc., who can be part of this. And again, very much connected to that would be how would you market it? So a really important part, I think. Probably one of my favourite parts of this process is ideation. And ideation is just idea generation. And it probably is the most important part, but it definitely can be a real fun part. When we start doing this, I always like to say go big. And I'm showing you some when I ran this with ASG, Associated Schools Group, or a cluster up in Canusie. So with primary, secondary, different faculties, technicians, everyone all together coming up with ideas. This one was really about how do we develop some STEM ideas within here. But the idea was go big, get as many as you can get down as possible. So as I say, it's easier to reduce a fantastical idea down to something closer that's realistic as opposed to going the other way. And again, just want to really encourage that idea of creativity and imagination. For me, I always say this when we're doing ideation, ideas generate ideas. So as many as possible. And we would use Post-its here, but when we're looking at digital, we can use Jamboards. I'm just thinking, Jennifer, if there was a way that some of our interrupted learners using a tool like Jamboards or a Miro board could be a really good way of actually listening to their thoughts and what they think about some of this stuff.
And so just to go back to the point made earlier about, if someone comes with their own idea and do they get precious about it? And actually by doing this process, it might depreciousize and help other young people, help develop that idea and it become the group's idea as well. So it's a really good way of kind of helping share that empowerment between, all the young people of an idea, bring them up together.
Definitely, Jen, and I think one of the processes that we do once we've got all these ideas down is we theme them. And quite often you'll find, oh, look, we've got similar ideas round about here. So it becomes, okay, well, let's work on that idea together because it's not just mine. I think that is quite an important part. But then as teams, you would vote on what is the hack that you're going to work on. And I think this is quite an important part. It can be a wee bit tricky. Going back to what you just said there, Jen, people can be a wee bit possessive perhaps over their idea. But you can see what we've done there is we put them up on the wall and then we use what we call a human bar chart. And it's basically stand in front of the one that you would like to work on. And again, it's quite active. It's a really key aspect of this, so people are engaging with it. Any comments on ideation or the voting part?
Now, so when we talked about the process earlier of the team development and then going on, I think what you're saying is there might be a possibility to then at the voting stage to then start developing teams there, or is this like, because if they're in teams of 4, in the pictures, there's much more than 4 people in those pictures. So would you say there is flexibility there to then create teams after the ideation phase, or would you not recommend that?
Well, they are actually in teams already. That's why there's 4 sitting around the tables.
Yeah.
So what we tried to do there was mix. So that one you can see closest to us, that's a maths science teacher from the secondary, primary head teacher and an early years practitioner. And again, mixing up, I guess, roles is quite key. So for me, it's the team does the ideation part. However, if you remember how industry does it, ideation comes before team formation. You don't have to follow any sort of model. What I find quite useful is when the teams would show up already formed because they've came from schools, but actually then this is part of that team working scenario, coming up with ideas.
Cool, thank you.
I guess there could be, to really complicate it, some reformation of new teams at this stage.
Yeah.
Is that what you're kind of thinking about, Jen? It's almost like when they see the ideas that have been generated, they might think, oh, I really want to do that one with some other people.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering about the flexibility because it just seemed I was literally just going off the pictures. So it just seemed like a lot of people around the one ideas kind of chart thing. But no, yeah, because I mean they've picked their personas by that point and then they've gone forward. So yeah, no, it was just curious.
Yeah.
I think the flexibility, Julia, is really key there, and it's like there isn't a set process. This isn't a framework in stone or anything. I think it's about, okay, well, again, it's all about users and saying, well, what would work with them? And do you get the chance then to change groups? Quite like the idea of that, personally.
Yeah.
Jan,
You've got a question? Sorry.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so because I'm communication support, I'm really keen on developing ideas of pupil voice up here in Orkney, and I've got a few sort of different projects going on, and I think this is going to be an awesome way to really encourage that. And I'm wondering if there have been examples of this working in primary settings as well. Like a lot of the pictures we've seen have been sort of secondary, and does it lend itself better to that secondary age group, the hackathon process, or has it been used with primary, early years, additional support needs? This is like maybe a question for later, but it just popped into my head, so I thought I'd ask.
Well, how about we discuss that? It was actually something I was wanting to talk about. Could we, after we go through this, just the 7 processes here, we can have a wee chat about that? No, don't apologise. Please don't apologise. For me, the ASM part was interesting because I would always just try and include them, and it was secondaries that we've done with hackathons. The primary one was something I really wanted to do. What we found worked better with primary was doing this over a longer period of time and almost giving them an engineering type challenge, but with the ethos here of what we've went through, keeping that still as at the heart of it. But we'll talk a wee bit more about that in a bit, if that's okay.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm really interested in your thoughts about this
Cool.
much as anything else. Okay, right, so after voting, rapid prototype. And I guess this can sometimes be a wee bit of a challenge for people, thinking about what this is. For me, it's about quickly building models or sketches to demonstrate your product or your service. So there's some examples here. I think the one down at the bottom is quite interesting because that's Dyson, who everyone talks about as great designers and all the rest of it. But you can actually see the process there. So of using some cardboard, using some wood, using shapes and things, and then perhaps, it looks like they're starting to mould prototypes as well. I guess I'm just putting that there to sort of demonstrate that's what design and industry actually does. So again, trying to reflect what happens, I think, is really key. Real world problems and reflecting actually about how people tackle these problems. But for me, it goes down to, it's all about cardboard, it's all about old bits of plastic bottles, it's about building things, I think, has become so much fun. So you can see there that, so someone's done a paper phone. I remember running a small hack in a school in Barhead, and it was about app development because we had a couple of app developers in working, and I really liked how it was just all paper. No one bothered coding anything for our whole app design process. It was just, no one touched the computer, no one done any of that. It was drawings, it was making models of how would the phone work, etc. So I really like that approach. And just interesting there, that sort of cardboard rucksack, that was one hack, not that image, but some young people from Notre Dame, again, built a secure rucksack with cardboard, with secret pockets and things like that, and it's just fantastic. It's so creative and so much fun. I'm making the point there about iteration is great if you've got time. So if you can revisit your model and try and improve it or try and change it, see what doesn't quite work, it's a great process to go through.
I was just
going to say, when I did a course with IDEO, and another dimension of prototyping that we did on that course was thinking about a user. Say if you were developing service design, it was to almost prototype what it would feel like to be that person. So if you were somebody who had some kind of disability, or so if you had visual impairment, or you weren't able to, you didn't have a good grip, for example, there were ways in which you could sort of actually test out your design by prototyping what that would feel like. And it was really interesting to do it. It might be, using public transport as an elderly person, for example, but it was another aspect of prototyping that was a useful thing to learn about.
Yeah, and I think there's loads of great service design tools for things like that, like journey mapping and things where you think about each stage and how that person, again, using these personas, empathy maps and things, how that person engages with that stage of a process, what would be some of the barriers or things. Yeah, I think that prototype for me is a really, really interesting word that perhaps I would love to see used more within education by young people who, as opposed to trying to create a final product or something, understanding actually the process that you have to go through with that. Anyway, lots and lots of fun there. And I think this has to be a really key bit. So what we would do in the museum is we would have these sort of inspiration stations, we called it, and it was just loads of straws, cardboard, paper, pens, everything to really try and get that sort of creativity happening.
If I could just mention, as part of my work in the Improving Gender Balance and Equalities team, there's a lot of research around the fact that girls have lower levels of self-efficacy, and as a result, they're more inclined, and not all of them, but a number of them more inclined to have a fixed mindset, and it's because they're they're more risk averse. They won't take risks, and it impacts, and it's that idea that it's part of the girl stereotype of perfectionism. And I think I love this idea of rapid prototyping because it's a safe environment to try things and to promote this idea that it doesn't have to be perfect, and they can try things, make mistakes, try things again, try building things, putting things together, and it might not look amazing, it might look amazing, but it might, and that's okay. And I think that is helping. That's a really nice approach to starting to combat that idea of gender stereotyping. So I think it's so many good good things in this kind of process.
That's brilliant to hear, Jen. And I do think that it's a really interesting aspect to this. And again, to encourage that idea of it's not about trying to create something that's perfect, because you can't do that straight away. For me, it's about testing, breaking, starting again, not starting again, but improving. So that is the whole iterative process. And some great examples of actually using 3D printers with a primary school in Ardennes in Glasgow and areas with a lot of deprivation, and just the change in the mindset of the kids. It was growth mindset, but the change in the mindset from these kids was they really enjoyed this idea of iteration of, here was my original model, and 5 stages later, this is what the new model looks like. And the teacher within it, and this was using 3D printing, primary 6s, I think they were, or primary 5s, and having this wall actually showing the iterative process for each of the models was just amazing and really inspiring. And the kids had changed how they viewed things like that. So it wasn't like, my model's rubbish. It was very much about, how do I make my model better? And again, I think that this process really can develop some of that mindset. I'm going to quickly just go into the presentation, and then we're just going to jump to having a quick discussion. I'm going to not bother with the other potential hack that we could look at. So the presentation, when we think about the presentation, for me, I think it's really important that the kids do this in front of all the other kids. Sometimes I've been to hacks where they go into a separate room with the judges. for me, it's about learning from everyone else. It's about actually hearing the processes that the kids have taken or other teams have taken. So you've got to think about how long do they have, who will be your judges. Again, can we look at that local community? Can we get a business to sponsor a hack? And that doesn't mean money necessarily. That can be sponsoring. Here is my challenge. I would like you guys to come up with some solutions for this. Think about the criteria. Does it actually tackle the initial problem? There has been quite a lot of hacks that were just brilliant, but they were nothing to do with what we'd set up at the start. And again, thinking maybe about business model, it's quite nice to have at that point. Truth is, this bit is basically Dragon's Den. Okay, that's what we're looking for here. We're looking at short pitches, maybe 3 to 5 minutes long. And what we would look for is them summarising the problem, showing the research, demonstrating the solution, what are the costs of marketing, and then conclusion. So that's the sort of model we would really look at for presentation there. I'm just quickly going to just show you what we would have done for this one, and then we're just going to open up to discussion. So when we think about the persona here for Alex and thinking about cycling around the city, not wanting to get wet. So here's the solution, if you like. This is the hack that essentially we came up with. So the team discussed Alex's problem, main issue, overcrowded public transport, lack of stylish and sensible waterproofs for cyclists. That's debatable perhaps, but they looked at, done a bit of research, found out about Nick's bikes, so she doesn't need to worry about actually storing the bike in her flat. You can actually ask that. So, and then they invented this rather strange contraption that's almost like a bike umbrella, which goes over it. What I find fun about this is it's a bit of a crazy idea. It probably isn't that practical, to be really honest. But they made this. All right, this wasn't actually the pupils who made this one, I have to admit. But there's just this whole idea of creating something like that that's going to make people have a look at it. Other options they could have thought about was developing apps about public transport. That's something that already exists, but not always with that real-time data, if you like. And so and then looking at some of the clothing issues there, is that the kind of service that an employer could actually offer? Or could that be something local if you were working in the city centre? Is there some solution of a service that we could think about there? And then I guess looking at the storage in a flat, that idea of developing smart storage hack, or how could you actually do that, could be quite interesting as well. So any questions about that part? Because we've only got 10 minutes left, and I'd quite like just a wee chat.
Well, one thing I like is about that one is just that it is about having bonkers ideas, and sometimes great ideas come out of real extreme ideas. Going back to the ideation session, that can be a way of, sometimes framing ideation is helpful, just to encourage people to have really, extreme ideas and then kind of reining it in a bit. But that one, it's just great to see that they made it and tried it out.
Yeah, and again, to encourage that idea of just do it. No, I mean, and they could have built like if this was in a school, they could build a bike out of Lego and create a small little prototype model of that. That's the kind of thing that we can look at. It is really fun when you start to do something on a sort of human scale as well. So, and yeah, you're totally right about make the ideas almost extreme as you can. I always think that's a really important part of this. Okay.
For me,
yes,
sorry.
so Jen, please.
I was just going to say, for me, my background's in community arts, and it's the thing that we would always focus on is having that shared positive experience to help build a community, whether it's just a community of 4 people or a community of a much bigger number. But the whole process, and it is that idea of it's process over product, although the zanier the product, the better. But that process of working together and going through all the way to presentation, those young people will remember that for the rest of their lives, and they'll remember the bonds that they created with the other learners that were there. And building that sense of community is just so important as part of building relationships, and also just making young people feel happy. And I think that we can't underestimate the power of just bringing happiness to children, because I honestly don't think an unhappy young person learns. And I think, through this process is a fun process. You're developing that happiness, and then they're much more likely to then be enthused at maybe the next project that you do, which might be completely different to a hackathon, but that positivity will shine through. So yeah, I just love this whole thing.
So as I said, I took my time over some of that a wee bit more, and originally we had looked at maybe running a hack. I was looking at it with plastic pollution, which is something that I'm very interested in and trying to get people engaged with. So create some personas and stuff. But I think for me, just commend you guys for actually hanging about and listening to me whittering on. I think that's great. But any thoughts about this, Jennifer, for instance, yourself?
Yeah, I was wondering when you were talking about maybe thinking about primary school and how they might use it and stretching the amount of time that you might give to allow for the task, would you have to do the time, for a full spread, or could you do like afternoons? And I'm just thinking that our young people probably would really struggle with the focus for 2 full days, of this, and I think that would be really difficult. But would you lose the momentum if you, just were looking at parts of days, doing it like mornings or afternoons and then doing other things, in their time? Have you ever seen one run like that?
I think that would work fine, to be honest with you, Jennifer. So the sort of engineering challenges that we ran with Jacobs, and again, I was looking at things like perhaps flooding in the city, and innovative ways that they could maybe look at some of that. That lasted 10 weeks, and that was for primary and secondary. But it was very much still the sort of, it wasn't the rapidness of a hackathon, which I think is quite, as its sort of USP. But you just take that model and say, well, these are the sort of processes we need to go through. So why don't we do that? And I guess going back to that idea of revisiting research, that can work really well, sort of thing. So yeah, for me, it's about, everything I try and do is about user-centered. So it's not about what I think, it's about what the users, the kids, what's going to work for them. And making that, and that can be part of a hack. You know what I mean? Like, well, let's look at this. Let's actually ideation about how this would work. You tell us how this would work best for you.
Yeah.
And I would be really interested in hearing about any sort of examples of that kind of thing, of how we can then engage. But I mean, I'll be honest, some of the primary hacks over that period of time were exceptional, and I'm like really, really exceptional. I'd spent a lot of time making models as well that some of the kids really, really loved. So yeah, I don't actually think that there is an age. I think you're right with the hackathon, the intense sort of thing. I think secondary kids actually really enjoy it.
Yes.
It feels like cutting edge, quite cool. You talk about this as all industry. This is Google, Facebook. Facebook's not going to land with them, but this is Instagram. This is how Instagram develops its products, all that sort of stuff. And I think that works well with secondaries, but an extended one shouldn't be an issue.
Just on that point, something I used to think quite a lot about when teaching drama was how to get them back into that creative space really quickly, because obviously you only got 50 minutes with them, and then to try and get them back into that storyline. And for me, it was about creating an immersive atmosphere. So it could be like just thinking about the lights and the sound, having sound effects, and making them feel like the minute they step into that space, they're immersed in this world. And so it means the engagement becomes quicker. I mean, for my drama units, I used to start with like hooks and lures and fascinators, so something that could quickly hook them to that would then maintain their engagement across a number of weeks, whether it was, the problem was we've crashed on a desert island, and then each week something, a new problem emerged that they had to deal with first before they then continued with the kind of the bigger issue that was overarching. But it's that immersive atmosphere to just just keep their engagement over that length of time. So yeah.
Jan, you've been very polite with your hand up. I'm very impressed
Oh,
with your
thank
team's
you. I
etiquette.
read the instructions beforehand. I always follow the instructions.
I didn't, so
That's not a slur on anyone who doesn't. I just can't not. Yeah, I'm super excited about this. I really am. In terms of, you mentioned way back hacking your school. I really, really want to get everybody involved in this, especially with the 2 secondary schools that we've got here, which is Kirkwall Grammar School and Stromness Academy. And I really want to do it in terms of inclusion. So yeah, I really want to know more about journey mapping and empathy mapping. So if you could point me to some resources to read about that, that would be super cool, please. But it's just, yeah, that's what I'm thinking of taking this forward, is in terms of inclusion and how we can best do that within our schools here.
yeah, if you could put your email in the chat,
Yeah,
I'll drop you a line.
thank you.
And I'll point you in the right direction with stuff. But I think it would be really useful to just have a catch up and talk about some of your ideas and see how we can try and support that. This is an approach I want to try and support people deliver. We're looking at doing it in the Cairngorms, and actually how young people looking at issues of things like transport, things like energy, etc., and really working with the kids who live in the national park. So something along the lines, and in particular, I think, how do you make your school, as you said, more inclusive, more accessible? Why do we do things that we do in school? Because that's what we do, and that's what we've always done. And it's, personally, I think that we need to really encourage our young people to think in a very different way with that. So just, yeah, we can catch up. It'll probably be after Easter, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm just
That's
flat
fine.
out.
I kind of hoped that if I just said what I was thinking, that you might offer to get in touch.
Just like that. And the same as for yourself, Jennifer. If there was stuff that you want to think about and potentially look at, obviously we talked a wee bit earlier about interrupted learners, but that's what I'm here for, and it's about this. Today was just about sort of, I guess, introducing this idea as potentially something that we can look at in education. I mean, I do think my experience of them all has been, it's actually transformed me, how I viewed things. So I do believe the transformational impact that it can have on young people could be immense. So I'm a lot more long in the tooth and cynical, perhaps.
No, I think the hacking the school thing sounds really exciting for giving people voice. Especially with, the fact that the kids I work with are almost excluded, from that. So,
yep.
And we could create personas basically just by retelling the stories of the young people that, we've been involved with over, a number of years.
And that persona, when the personas become real people, change their name and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
When it's a real person, again, the power of that persona is exceptional, I think. Okay. After 12, so anything else anyone would like to say or comment or?
No, thank you. It's been brilliant. It's really great to have, it's been really lovely to have this time to just work through it and hear from you having so much personal experience of running them. So thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, we had no idea whether or not the nano hack online would work anyway. So actually, and I still don't know, but I think it'd be good to, was that valuable for you guys then, sort of going through that process? Right, good.
There's also a feedback form in the chat pane, and we would appreciate, and obviously I think it's anonymous, but again, there's only 3 of you, so we'll know if someone doesn't fill it out.
And it's been so lovely hearing the really broad perspective from everyone as well into how they feel this process, the hackathons, the design thinking process might help in their areas of work. It's been really, really interesting.
So we've got a message there in the chat from Alexandra. Yeah, I mean, the time difference must be...
I can speak. Here is 6 a.m. so I can have a little bit of talking. Yeah, I'm sorry I was late and I'm sorry I was quiet. I usually am not, but now it's very early, so I haven't even waking up. But your conversation was so amazing and it was so helpful that I wanted to end up talking a little bit. So yeah, everything was very interesting, but our theme of our hackathon that we will have in 2 weeks is very wide. So it's not local, it's not focused on persona, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
It's focused on a group of people with an ethnia that we are not very familiar with. So it's very difficult for us to be to be in their shoes when we are not within that people, within that group. So that was something that I wanted to get more input on how to address it. I don't know if you have it any. Well, thank you anyways, because it's been helpful to be here.
No, it's a real pleasure you joined. Where are you in the States?
Yes, I am in Florida. I live in schools, yes, but I work in a school in Mexico, which is very weird. I am the coordinator there, and the school in Mexico is going to be part of this hackathon within weeks.
So I think for me, looking at that, you're not within that community. To me, then it was perhaps that market research part beforehand, if possible, to actually go out and interview and survey people within the community. I can see there it's about financial literacy. And again, I guess it's about, okay, well, what understanding do they currently have about finance and perhaps even, it's coming off the top of my head, but perhaps I guess some of the things, like even if it was like a bank statement or even percentages of APR, do you understand that and getting perhaps a feel for
Oh, you've gone off again, Mark.
Yeah.
Meeting today with different people, which is great. That newsletter today, if you wouldn't mind turning off your microphone, just limit background noise.
I think we're getting interference from somewhere.
That's really strange.
Sorry, I muted you, Mark, to see if it would go away, and it did. So maybe unmute yourself now to see if it's fixed it. That's so weird. That's so weird. Well, everyone has Mark's contact details, so potentially you'll just set up one-to-ones with you all to discuss each of your things further. That's so weird. We've been hacked. We have been hacked.
Yeah, we've been hacked. I've never had that experience before.
No.
Good. Well, thank you both. Thanks, Jen, for your brilliant input, and I loved your warm up at the beginning. I want to do that again.
It's great.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. That was absolutely crazy, wasn't it? That was. I think by the looks of it, I on another website just joined another meeting. I hadn't touched anything, so.
Oh God.
Anyway, yeah. Look, listen, guys. I really appreciate that. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the informality and just the chat about it all. So, you've got my contact. I've got yours, Jennifer, Claire, Alexandra. Just drop me a line and we can catch up about anything.
Maybe at a better time for you, Alexandra, because the commitment to come in at 5-6 a.m. Oh, amazing.
Well, thank you. It was very worth it, let me tell you.
Oh, thank you very much. But yeah, just drop us a line, Alexandra, and we can chat about that, and I can maybe point in the direction of some of the other things. But wonderful to hear that you're taking that approach to such an important social justice issue. Again, that's probably what drives the vast majority of us within education, is that idea of social justice. So I would love to see more hacks about that.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, guys.
Brilliant,
Okay.
thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.